So Kyle, 5 years ago, we sat down and we covered a lot of ground. We talked about what it was like growing up as a lacrosse player, move through your career. We talked about family. We talked about your influences. We talked about what it was like to be black in the world of lacrosse. And over the intervening 5 years, a lot has happened. You were part of the formation of a new pro lacrosse league. You retired from being a player. The sport had a conversation around the racial dynamics within the coach and player base in a way that had never previously occurred. And now you're getting inducted into the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame. So we're back at Friends School, where it all started. And we're with the guy who started it all for you, your dad. Miles, I want to start with you. What is it like to think about and reflect on Kyle's career as a lacrosse player?
We often use the term surreal as we're describing things that we really feel had an impact. But it does feel surreal to know that from Friends Middle School Lacrosse to Lutherville Lacrosse, from Lutherville Lacrosse to Friends Middle School Lacrosse, and subsequently Hopkins, and now Kyle's about to be inducted into the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame. I think I can use the word surreal, and it has meaning in this particular statement. The real joy of it was watching it develop. I saw a very young athlete who had the capability of certainly progressing, but you can never predict a rise like this to being inducted into the Hall of Fame. So it's, as I said, people overuse surreal, but this is surreal.
Kyle, you said something earlier that I want you to reflect on a little bit. You said, "We did it." It's a short sentence. There's 3 words in it. They each mean something. Yeah. But the one that means the most is "we."
Yeah, look, I don't know. I think, well, it's definitely a we, right? And I think there's so many layers to that we. The we that I was talking about in particular at that moment was me and him, because, you know, his story and what Morgan went through, and even back to Forest Park before Morgan, like that's been well documented. And you know, as a father now myself, you think through your responsibility, like your job as a dad, is to go through whatever the hell you have to go through so that your kid has a better opportunity. Like, that's it, period. And that's not sport specific, that's life specific. Like, you gotta put up with some stuff, you gotta experience some stuff, you gotta go through hardships, you gotta do all these things so that the next generation, and in our situation, your son or daughter, has a better opportunity. And so for us, when I say we did it, like, you know, I have to imagine when my dad and his group went through what they went through. Again, let's start at Forest Park and then transition to Morgan. Like, the end game was to create an environment that more people that looked like us could play. That was the goal. And not only could they play, but they could play at schools that maybe they weren't gonna get an opportunity to play at. Not only could they play at schools they weren't gonna get an opportunity to play at, maybe they'll be the best player on that team. Like, that was the end game. And so when I say we did it, like, he put up with a lot of shit so I would have the opportunity to do this. And so when I say we did it, it was me and him. And then the next layer down is it's my mom and my sister and my teammates and my coaches and all the different, I mean, Dad said it, you know, Lutherville to Friends, to Hopkins, to professional, like, it's all of those people. And then as a pro, it really is, you know, my wife putting up with me traveling all over the place, me playing, me constantly limping around the house, being banged up, maybe not being able to help as much as I could. I think about, you know, this last 8 years of having Brooke and Smith. Like, for Brooke, she was pregnant at the World Games, and nobody knew she was pregnant at that time, so she was in a hotel by herself, but she knew I needed her there for support. And so I think about those days. I think about, you know, Smith and the pregnancy of Smith, and that was in the middle of the season. Like, that was the heart of that pregnancy, the last trimester, that was in the middle of the MLL season. So I was gone every weekend. And I just think about all the sacrifices that so many folks have had to make. So when I say we, I mean it in every sense of that word. I mean it us two, I mean our entire family, I mean extended coaches, teammates, everybody. But when I said it earlier, I talked about with this, we met him because what he went through put me in the position to be here. And had he not done that, it doesn't happen.
Miles, when Kyle and I spoke 5 years ago, I think one of the questions that I asked and the answers that he gave that meant the most to a lot of people was about whether or not he, on the basis of what he experienced, would want other kids, and specifically his kids, to experience it themselves. I didn't get the opportunity to ask you that question when you were his age, making that decision for him. But we obviously know the answer based on how the last 25, 30 years have unfolded. What was it like for you to make the decision to have your son play lacrosse?
The fortunate thing about my early experience is it was positive because I had a coach that coached me in football that started my interest in lacrosse. And with that comfortable confidence that that particular coach and me as an African American wanted me to play that sport, I just thought that that was the appropriate thing to do, to start to expose as many people that look like me to the sport of lacrosse. And very clearly, the person who was growing up in my house was an easy fix. And so really early on, long before I became involved with things like the Charm City Youth Lacrosse League and all, I was proselytizing. I was trying to make sure that people understood this could be an all-inclusive sport. It is one that incorporates all of the skills of many of the sports that we know, the movements of basketball, the picks and rolls, and some of the hitting of football, not all the stuff that has my injuries here, but indeed it was this panacea as I saw it. I got exposed to it. He got to play it as a middle schooler here, and it became clear to me that that was something that was evolving and was going to go further. Did I ever in my wildest dreams think this would happen? You can't really dream that far. Yeah.
It's a good opportunity, Kyle, to ask you about what retirement and the opportunity to celebrate your career means to you. Mm-hmm. We've already talked about, to some degree at least, the folks who you owe a debt of gratitude to. Mm-hmm. But from the standpoint of your own satisfaction and reflection,
yeah.
When you think back, I don't want to ask what the moments are. I think we probably can assume what a lot of the moments are. But
yeah.
But what matters to you about the fact that you met enough of your goals to get the highest level of recognition a player can get?
Yeah. Well, you hit the nail on the head in terms of it's really gratitude for everybody else because I'm not here without everyone else. And I think the question you just asked, Pop, around me playing, like you asked me that 5 years ago, and I think my opinion's actually changed. I think because it's in large part due to my experience. Like, was I the only brown pair of legs on fields at times? Sure, like that I did. My experience was phenomenal. I had great coaches, I had great teammates, I had great surrounding families, like my teammates' parent. Like I had a great experience.
It's the village.
Yeah, and so that's where my mind goes. The village of people that were around to put me in the situation and my sense of gratitude to them. But in terms of my playing career, I think I'm probably the most proud, Terry, that my game never changed. Never. Until the end. when like I got old and couldn't run around. But like when you watched me play here, even at Lutherville, like my game was to do everything. It was to play defense, it was to play offense, it was to face off, it was to play wings and face offs, it was to play man down. It was literally to play lacrosse. And then coming out of here, the commentary was that like I wasn't skilled enough offensively to play offense in college. So maybe I'm a D-midi. But then I got to college and I'm on the first midfield playing offense, and I played offense and I played defense and I faced off and I did all those things and that was my game. right? That was my game until I got old and couldn't do it anymore. But we were able, and I think it's a testament to my parents for keeping me here at Friends. Because a lot of people said, like, if he stays here, this ain't working. Like, he needs to go to a Gilman, a St. Paul's, a Loyola, Calvert Hall, whatever. He needs to get out of Friends. But they kept me here, and I played the same game until I couldn't anymore, and that was enough. And I think that's probably the thing I'm the most proud of.
Why'd you keep him here?
We're sitting in an institution that not only allows growth academically, but growth as a person, as a citizen of the school, and as a citizen of the world. Friends, I think, really knows how to develop young people's feelings of apathy for other human beings, and allows them to see the broad picture. He got, St. Paul's and several other, Gilman, McDonough, were all places that he had the opportunity to go to. We visited a couple of places, and they just didn't seem to be the kind of place that we wanted our student part of the athlete to go to. We chose Friends as we came here to interview because the environment seemed to be very comfortable and, shall we say, inviting for diversity at a time when that really had not started.
Right. So I mentioned that a lot has transpired over the last 5 years. I'm interested in your point of view on your son, the entrepreneur. Obviously, you used the opportunity to play college lacrosse as a launching pad for an incredible career as a surgeon. When we spoke 5 years ago, I talked about the fact that your son went to one of the foremost, institutions in the world where, producing doctors and groundbreaking medical research must have been a really cool opportunity to tie together two links in that chain for you. He's not a doctor. He's an entrepreneur, and he's been a part of a lot of entrepreneurial endeavors. What's it been like for you to see those develop?
I just love to be on the sideline watching it. Very clearly, I was in a very tracted life. You go to college, you go to med school, you become a doctor for 40 years, you operate, and then you retire. Being able to see the diversity in the things that he does on a daily basis now as a professional, certainly not talking about playing, but all the other as just ancillary things that are going on, it is amazing to me that he can keep up with all of the things that are going on at one time. And I think that speaks to the fact that my wife, his mom, while I was introducing him to sports, was kind of building a person along with Friends School who understood what the important things were and continued to prioritize things appropriately. What I knew was if he got the opportunity, I was seeing the best athlete that I had ever been up close to growing up in my house. So I knew if the opportunity presented itself, he could rise to the occasion. But the temperament was put there by Wanda Harrison, my wife.
Kyle, PLL specifically, it provided you a platform for the last chapter of your career. But you were kind of in on the ground level. What was the experience like? And that's a question that's inclusive of both, on the field and the experience of playing a final season, and off the field, and being a part of building a league.
It was it was interesting, man. I learned so much from, and just let's rewind back to 2018, like the start of it. Like I learned so much from that process, and Paul and Mike and the investors, and just how it was put together and how you build not only a business, how you build a league. And it was a wild time because I remember me and Paul's first meeting. It was at what's that breakfast? Iron Rooster in Federal Hill. During the convention, and we sat down, and he was like, rolled the whole thing out for me, and I'm thinking, all right, okay, so this is like it's 2018, this is a 2020 thing. He's like, now we're looking at, announcing the fall. And I was just blown away by one, how much work had been done already to get to the meeting with him to hear like, no, this is going to be real. And then you fast forward, 6 months later, and you've got almost 300 players signed, and you're launching a whole new league. And so I think the startup, that was, I've started other businesses. There was LXM, there were some other things, but that was at the time back in 2018. That was the first like real startup I had been a part of, like ground floor, watching real capital be raised, building real departments, and launching an office in New York, launching an office in LA, moving players across the country, and launching an entirely new professional league. So that was incredible, and Mike and Paul's conviction and commitment to making that move, that was my first time being up close to something like that, and I learned a ton from it. Player side of it, incredible. Like for me as at the time, what was I? If I retired at 38, I was 35. The style of the PLL, 28-year-old me, I would have never left that field. Like that, the game is faster, this field's shorter. Like I love everything about it. The 2-point line's a yard and a half or 2 yards closer. Like the game I would have loved. I think as an older guy, it was fun to watch this new generation of player come up, watch how the game changed, exactly. Watch how defenses had to change. That 2-point arc, now it's a little tighter. Like it used to be Paul, really, Max Siebold, I feel like Strebo used to hit him. Kyle Dixon. Yeah, Kyle Dixon used to hit him on the run, but like not a ton of guys could shoot those. Now that thing's at 15, people can shoot those. And so it's just a different style of game. So I loved the style, and I'm fortunate that, it launched and the eyeballs that were on that league as I was transitioning out of playing, it was really cool. It was cool to be a part of it, and again, from the startup, from the entrepreneur side, I learned so much from that build at the beginning.
So we've covered a lot of ground, and I know that there are a couple more topics that we want to hit on.
Yeah.
But one thing that does come to mind is the idea of celebration, and what being inducted into a Hall of Fame is meant to represent is a celebration, and that's a reflection on the fact that you hit a lot of your goals, as well as the community that supported you in order to get there. What else? What else is it? You've been inducted to other Halls of Fame. Like what else is that celebration about?
Damn, Terry. It's a good question. Outside of what you just said, right, which is checking boxes of things you're chasing in your career, and then being appreciative, showing gratitude to all the village of people it took to get you there, both in your family and outside of your family. I think, what else does this check the box? I'm hopeful. I don't know, but I'm hopeful that for all kids, but primarily and more specifically like black and brown kids like me, look and see, I can do that because someone that looks like me just did it. And I hope that that's what it does. And I think I'm lucky. The guy that I wanted to be was 2 doors down. And so I was chasing that. But I think representation for anyone of any color in any sport matters. Just like when you see someone that looks like you doing it, you're like, oh, I want to do that. I can remember watching Damian Davis cover Mike Powell in the Final Four and being like that. Like I want to do that. And so I'm hopeful that, and I hope that the next black male or female player comes along and does more than I did. Like that's no different from what we were talking about earlier with my dad. Like he did what he did, so I'd have a chance to do this. And now I hope that the next one comes along and does more than I did. That means I did my job. And so that's what I'm hopeful for.
And Miles, we'll end on this. So along those lines, relative to Kyle and I you have a point of view on the way that the sport has grown and diversified that extends 20, 30, 40 years longer than we do. With respect to how things have evolved in just the last 2 or 3 years, what's your point of view on lacrosse as a sport that's for everybody?
Well, certainly as we look at the advent of the PLL, we're seeing a top-notch professional league, which we're used to seeing in other sports, football, basketball, and so forth. I think that kind of exposure will allow kind of a retrograde look, looking at the top and then kind of for people who are not in the lacrosse space, wanting to know what the journey is to that pinnacle. I think everybody knows how the basketball journey is, how the football journey is, but I'm not sure many people who are not within the lacrosse space know where you start to get to this endpoint. So a story like this that is going to be told both visually and audibly, I think is going to inspire some kids out there with a stick in their hand, just as Kyle said 5 minutes ago. I want to do that.
Yeah, and only thing I'd add, Terry, is that from a diversity standpoint in the sport, I see, and you can't get caught up with social media, right? Because Wild West in terms of what people say and who has a platform. But I see a more consistent conversation happening across the sport at every level, and a more unified effort. And I hope that 2028 and everything happening there, we have a 4-year runway to get our act together as a group and put a united front together and have one message, one clear message that we are an inclusive sport and we get to relaunch to the world in 2028. So that's my hope, and I do feel like that's currently happening with the discussions that are happening.
Yeah. Terry, may I make an addendum to my comment?
Of course.
In piggybacking on Kyle's comment, my observation of the diversity that has occurred in the last 5 to 7 years gives me hope that that vision that we had back then is truly coming to fruition. There's not one pair of brown legs on that field or 3 pairs over a season. We're seeing truly the beginning of numbers of African American players of color, not just African American, players of color who are both accomplished and committed to the sport, and all that can do is make things better when you add diversity.
Yeah, that's the way I see it. I mean, I think about it in the context of like what the goal is, right? And I think that at the highest level and the most not quantitative, qualitative level, it's that anybody who wants to play has the opportunity to. And that's a question about cost and access, but it's also a question about perception, right? Is this something that I want to do, that I will have a good experience with doing? So I think that you can look at it quantitatively, and as more folks get in, it suggests that qualitatively there's progress being made. And you know, I think that the NCAA's demographic breakdown is the best quantitative reflection of the sport. And you know, I've studied the numbers over the last 10, 11, 12 years, and not only is the sport 40% more diverse than it was 10 years ago, but the rate of diversification is increasing. And it's interesting to see from a, you know, kind of individual population instance, like how that evolves. But I also think that despite the fact that it's the best number because it's the kind of most like strict, it's the best data set, it's also 18 to 22 year olds. Right. There's a 10 to 15 year lag relative to the boots on the ground situation. The progress that's being made now is going to show up in those numbers in 5 to 10 years.
Right, that's right.
And I think that I see a lot of reasons for hope and optimism. And I think that it's an incredibly important thing to understand from a historical perspective, the role that 10 Bears played in that, and the role that the conversation that you and I had 5 years ago, and the role that the conversation that the sport had in the summer of 2020 has had in that, because it's a combination. I mean, it's a 360 degree issue, and to the extent that it's a problem, it's a 360 degree problem where solutions need to come from every angle, and every stakeholder has an opportunity to provide a solution, right? It's unfair to expect you two, specifically as individuals, to bear an outsized percentage of the burden beyond what 2 individuals should bear.
Right.
You and I have had this conversation all the time. Whenever there's an issue, it ends up in your inbox. Right? And that's not fair. It might be the reality, but the point is, how can we evolve the reality to the point where there's more than one person who bears, or two people who bear the responsibility of representation and opportunity.
Yeah.
Representative numbers of people who are recognized as having a knowledge base about the game, the current game.
Yeah. And to the point that there are specific examples. I mean, I think you look at Ohio State and Yale men's lacrosse rosters, the percentage breakdown of each, kind of ethnic population is really close to the population of the United States.
Yeah.
And in and of itself, that represents a combination of intentionality and a reflection of the fact that if you are intentional about it, not to the point where you're sacrificing competitiveness, but intentional about it, you can do it. It is not impossible. You don't have to hide behind the excuse of it can't be done.
That's right.
Well, that lag of experienced players of color has narrowed. That is, back when I started playing, there just weren't that many of us who had, and none of us who had played at anything below the high school level. Most of us who were football players got exposed to lacrosse after that first football season where coach said, I want you to come out for lacrosse rather than going out for baseball. And that's exactly what my life was. So those early exposures now of players of color, I think allows them to certainly have skill sets that are far more advanced than any of us. I mean, we were just driven. I mean, you put that stick in my hand as a 10th grader, by the 12th grade, I could play lacrosse with anybody. It's a very narrow development of skill time period. Whereas you got kids playing in lower school and middle school now that look like us, and they're getting there ready to go.
Yeah.
That's right.
Cal, you said that you saw Damian Davis guard Mike Powell and that you wanted to be that. And unfortunately, you didn't play with a long stick. But these videos of you make it think that maybe had you picked up a long stick, we'd still be having this conversation.
Look, man,
as you're going into the national.
Those are some of my favorites. Any time we have the opportunity to do that at our events, and I can pick up a long stick and go after kids. It's some of my favorite stuff to do.
Keyword, kid.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to go after grown-ups.
Throw
a bow and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah.
And it can't be the college-age kids or high school kids because they'll run through me. We've had that happen once. You got middle school kids like the drill, but that's like my demographic for that drill. They don't protect their stick well.
Yeah. Can I make a corollary statement to that? Just watching the modern-day defensemen compared to the guys that were covering us, they were big, they had sticks, but they didn't have the same skill levels. And watching these defensemen disarm people and just, I mean, they're offensive players on the defensive side of the game. It is utterly amazing. Yeah. Big and fast.
Miles Harrison, Kyle Harrison, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Terry.